A320neo and Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. Those are the key headlines we are tracking, and now we are focusing on China's bid to strengthen ties with the Arab world. Chinese President Xi Jinping met Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman early this week, kicking off his three-day visit to the Gulf region. The two leaders stressed on the importance of global oil market stability and Saudi Arabia's role in achieving this balance. According to the Saudi press agency, the countries have signed agreements worth around $30 billion, and these include setting up a Huawei cloud computing region and building EV manufacturing plants in Saudi Arabia. Let me go across to our guest. We're joined by Gordon Chang, columnist and expert on China. Also joining us on the show is Anil Trigunath, former Indian ambassador to Jordan. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Gordon Chang, this has been described as the largest scale diplomatic activity between China and the Arab world. The significance, according to you?
Really, this is the repudiation of ties between the region and the United States that go back basically 90 years. And so we have a monumental shift. And this is, I think, a warning to the Biden administration that they cannot actually humiliate Saudi Arabia, to give it a hard time, and think that there would be no consequences. So, President Biden's July trip to the region and to Saudi Arabia, I mean, there was such a cold reception that he received in really comparison to this visit that Xi Jinping has with all the royal flourishes. This is really a stark contrast.
Right. So you're saying that it is a warning to President Biden about growing ties between China and Saudi Arabia. How will this deepen energy ties between China and Saudi Arabia, Ambassador Trigunath?
Well, as Mr. Gordon said, it's absolutely right that Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf countries, as well as the Arab countries, have been also following an Act East policy, consequent to their disenchantment with the way the U.S. security umbrella worked or the U.S. humiliation in certain contexts. We have seen that during the Russia-Ukraine war, during the energy crisis that is happening. But China happens to be their largest oil importer and the largest trading partner. And China, as you know, this is the second visit of President Xi Jinping. He came here in 2016 when he also visited Iran and Egypt. And they formulated a policy which is called Arab Paper, in which they followed the 1+2+3 policy. And the Middle East happens to be one of the key constituents for the Chinese BRI project. And that's what the Vision 2330 of Crown Prince or Prime Minister Salman, as well as that of the Chinese BRI, they are in sync today. And therefore, what is happening is that the Saudi Arabia is also spreading its risk, and it is going where its bread and butter lies. Now, today, China and India happens to be the largest importers of the Middle Eastern oil, and therefore, these countries also have to secure their markets at the same time. And China is doing very much what is trying, the space that is being vacated and the retrenchment that is being perceived by them after the Afghanistan withdrawal of the US, that they'll have to also spread their risks across, whether it is Sino-Russian ambit or whether within the regional rapprochement that they are trying to bring about today.
Right. Gordon Chang, what is your sense? This is not just a meeting between Mohammed bin Salman and Xi Jinping. Ahead of this visit, he's met leaders of the Arab world. He's met leaders of Egypt, of Sudan, of Palestine. He's going to be attending a reception of Arab League as well. So what does this outreach really mean? How does this undermine United States' role in the region and all the work they have done over the years?
It's interesting that countries in the region generally want robust commercial relations with China. So it's no surprise that the Arab League and the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, want these robust ties. At the same time, they're very concerned about China. And they know that China has robust relations with Iran, and Iran is their enemy. So this is a point where they realize they do need the United States for security, but they sort of take that for granted. And so that's why, for instance, you can see all of this very, very lush welcome for Xi Jinping, because they realize that they can do that and the United States will still be there. But it really is, I think, a warning to the Biden administration, as I said, that they just can't take this relationship for granted anymore. And Biden certainly has. And that's a stark contrast to the Trump administration, which actually tried to work on ties with Riyadh.
Ambassador Srigunath, this is coming at a time when the US and India are cracking down on Chinese companies, Huawei for one. There are investigations going on against so many Chinese companies in India. There has been a crackdown on Chinese apps as well. Relations have always been complicated over the last few years, especially since the incident on the India-China border. Do you feel that China at this stage is looking for greater markets, for greater acceptability of its goods, of its companies?
Well, as far as the Middle East is concerned, I think the economic engagement, as far as China is concerned, is pretty robust. But they are going to make it far more intrinsic, bringing about the technological and innovation, as you mentioned about the Huawei. Despite the US concerns, most of the countries in the region have been able to roll out the 5G. And now this cloud computing agreement that has been agreed with the Huawei. So we are going to look at much more. So China is going with this digital Silk Road initiative, the Health Silk Road initiative, the maritime, going around with the ports from all over. So China has been able to somehow manage the relationship in a much better way, I would say, from Tehran to Tel Aviv. Now they are getting projects everywhere. At the same time, what I'm seeing into the region itself, that the region by itself wants to have some kind of a stability. No doubt that there is a problem between Saudi Arabia and Iran. But as we see that there is also an rapprochement, there are also talks that are going on. At the same time, they understand their threats. So can they have a common minimum denominator? So that's something that's very important for India also. Because for India, also the Middle East and the West Asia and the Gulf, especially, is an extremely important region. And so we have to be cautious that there is no instability there at the same time. Now, China and US obviously will be in competition for geopolitical, geostrategic influence. But China is looking at something, in my view, that since the US is retrenching from the region to focus on the Indo-Pacific, the Chinese are looking at the Indo-Pacific. That's why they talked about the Gwadar port, as you know, in Pakistan, CPEC connecting so that the Saudi oil can flow into the refinery that the Saudis want to make in Gwadar, so that the Chinese oil supplies should not go to the Malacca Straits and all. So it's far more strategic and a long-term planning that the Chinese are getting into.
Okay, Gordon Chang, coming to the Russia-Ukraine war, United States, and they made this point during the G20 meetings in India as well, that we would like to bring Russia to book, hold them accountable, look for more ways to put pressure. At a time when they are trying to convince the world about the importance of a price cap on Russian oil, what can closer ties between China, the Arab world, and Saudi Arabia really do to President Biden's attempts to set things right geopolitically for the United States and bring Russia to the book or hold them accountable for the war in Ukraine?
The main issue is going to be the price of oil. And if, for instance, the price of oil goes up, that certainly helps Russia finance its war effort. And that was really the focus of President Biden's trip in July, was to get oil production going. And clearly, Saudi Arabia said no. It was very clear that they rejected the American position on that. So that's going to be a major effect. I mean, in a sense, you can look at it in just saying this is a global oil issue. But no, it's really an issue about the Ukraine war. And if the international community can't force Russia out of Ukraine, then Xi Jinping and other aggressors are going to march against their victims. And I think we will see instability and war and conflict around the world. This is one of those hinge points in history. And if things go wrong, and it looks like they are going wrong, we could find ourselves in a very different world in a very short period of time.
Right. Do you also feel that President Xi's Arab world outreach has also a lot to do with the crackdown by US on Chinese companies, Chinese investments in the United States, and very recently, the ban on export of any kind of semiconductor technology, services to China, and not just from the United States, anywhere in the world. These are widespread sanctions that they had announced on the Chinese economy. Do you think China would now look for markets, and in Saudi Arabia, they find an ally to circumvent those sanctions?
I think that China's
Chang.
efforts towards Saudi Arabia have continued for a very long time, even before the Biden chip actions. I think the real issue to here, though, is not so much American actions towards China, but is the real problems in the Chinese economy. 2 days ago, we got November trade data, which clearly shows that China is contracting overall because those numbers were disastrous. And I think that that certainly has an effect that China wants to be able to sell to foreign markets because internally its market is exhausted.
Right. Ambassador Trigunait, as far as India goes, we have been trying to negotiate a free trade agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council. How can a closer trade relationship between China, Saudi Arabia, and the GCC impact India's efforts?
Well, I think that, as I always maintain, that as far as India is concerned, China is going to be your geostrategic competition in every geography. And since West Asia is extremely important for us, so we have to also up the game. Fortunately, we have the strategic partnerships. And when these countries are looking at least they are looking at India and China together. They are also not looking at a conflict situation between India and China, that is between these two countries. But at the same time, we are going to have this kind of sometime we'll have this kind of a problem that's coming. And that's why you are looking at various different trilaterals, quadrilaterals coming up in the Middle East. And India has done this I2U2 grouping and all. So I think that for India, now that we have these strategic partnerships with nearly all the countries, they appreciate India's concerns and they do understand the problem between India and China, in which they don't want to be caught up, like they don't want to be really caught up between the US and China game. So how far they can manage it, that's a different thing. As far as India is concerned, I believe that we need to sit up and look at other opportunities that are there and be fast or agile on the feet.
Right. Being agile on the feet is extremely important for India and also for the United States at this juncture when geopolitical tensions are at their peak. Gordon Chang, Ambassador Anil Trigunait, thank you very much for joining us here on Global Eye, giving your view on the crucial meeting between President Xi and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. We're going to take a short break here, but coming up, concerns over COVID outbreak grow as China